You're listening to the Mid-Career GPS podcast, episode 92.
What's going on in their life at this moment? Okay. So if you go in, let's say very basically to ask for a raise and your boss has been under a lot of pressure and you know they're dealing with either an acquisition or they're getting pressure from their boss, you don't go in to ask for a raise at that point. You just don't. You have to hold yourself back. If you must, if you feel like it, you need to approach them in such a way that recognizes their pressures.
How often have you questioned whether or not it is the right time to ask for something you want? If you're considering asking for a raise, promotion, or more opportunities, you might be filling your brain with a lot of drama about whether or not you should ask, let alone how you should ask. It's all normal. If you take your shot, you want to make sure that you are in the best possible position to make it happen. You don't want to take that shot and miss, and you want to get whatever it is that you want. Sometimes it'll happen, and other times it won't. Today, you are going to meet Robin Merle. When it comes to going for the ask, Robin is an expert. Robin has raised more than $500 million in philanthropy for various organizations throughout her career. And it is Robin's career walk that you're going to learn about today and what she calls a stun gun moment when she was told her services were no longer needed. She quickly found herself unemployed and trying to figure out what was next. This is the Mid-Career GPS podcast, and I'm your host, John Nerrell. I'm here with you each week to help you show up to find the job you love or love the job you have using my proven 4-step formula. It's time to start building your mid-career GPS, so let's get started. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the podcast. I want to take this moment to thank you for listening, following, subscribing, reviewing. If you've got an idea for a future podcast, tell me. You can message me on LinkedIn or email me at john@johnnerrell.com. Season 2 has been fantastic so far, and I'm excited to bring you more episodes and fascinating guests who come on to share their lessons learned about their careers to help you with your career path. So if there's a particular person, story, field, interest that you want to learn more about, message me, tell me, and let's see how we can make that happen. Now, for today's episode, this is, again, all about the power of networking. Laura Rotter, who was a previous guest on my show, I'll link up in the show notes to her episode where we talked about your money story, introduced me to Robin Merle. And when I talked to Robin and I learned about her story, she clearly covered one of those things that happens to many of us along our mid-career journey. And it's why I wanted to have her on the show. So I want you to meet her.
I have been a senior executive in the nonprofit world for billion-dollar organizations for more than 35 years. And I had a sudden, unexpected departure from one of my organizations, and that led me to write my book, Involuntary Exit, A Woman's Guide to Thriving After Being Fired. I have since started my own consulting firm called Robin Merle Associates, LLC, where I consult with other nonprofits. And I am also building a platform to help women who have gone through a similar experience or do want to move on.
It's no surprise that heart-centered leaders and professionals grow up wanting to work in fields where they get to help people. While this is undoubtedly true for Robin, it's the last thing she tells us about that should make you take notice.
I wanted to teach every grade in school as soon as I completed it. I love school. And so I wanted to be a teacher, but I was always a writer, and I connected those two things as being a communicator to help others learn. And finally, when I did get to be almost a grown-up, I decided the most important thing for me was to be financially independent. And that's a big part of my story as well.
We learn skills when we are younger, and we find ways to transfer those skills into roles that we hold as our careers progress. Given Robin's interest in writing, she found many ways to transfer those writing and communication skills throughout her career.
Oh my gosh. I'm glad you asked that question. I actually started out as a fiction writer. And that was really important to my career as a fundraiser, because in fundraising, you have to persuade people to your point of view. You have to basically make things up, what people today call the vision, before it exists. And you have to hear what they might say in a dialogue. So you have to anticipate what they might say. So that form of communication is really important in almost any career, because we're always in a relationship with someone else, and how we get ahead, how we promote ourselves, and how we present ourselves really depends on how we strategically, today they call it brand ourselves, but how we strategically communicate, build trust, and build a relationship. To me, words are really important.
Whenever you network or interview, you must find ways to get someone interested in who you are and what you do. So listen carefully to how Robin tells her career story. You can learn a few things from her here.
I am proud of being one of the first women to attend Rutgers College. There were less than 500 of us and about 7,000 males. And that sort of set the pace for me wanting to break barriers and be a pioneer. And I went to graduate school from there, got an MA at Johns Hopkins in fiction writing, and then went into advertising at New York City. My goal was to be in New York no matter how I got there, and being on Madison Avenue was a dream. So I wrote advertising for a while, and I got tired. Again, words are important, of using just 3-letter words. Yes, now, got it. And saw an ad in what was then the Village Voice of New York for a writer at NYU, and it was their fundraising department. So I was thrilled. I went there, and my colleagues were fiction writers, poets, and dramatists. And we started writing to help NYU raise money. From there, I went back to Rutgers because I loved it and helped raise money for them for a long time. And then went to Hospital for Special Surgery and was there for 20 years and loved that experience as well. And went back to my beginnings in public education when I took my last position at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, which was public education, helping underserved students, which is, I'm a big believer in public access to education. And during that time, wrote my book, started consulting, and here I am with you, John, the pinnacle of my career.
I always say it's the totality of our experiences. So here we are in this moment. Absolutely. I truly appreciate and respect my guests, and am honored that they give up their time to spend with me so they can share their stories with you. But admittedly, I am fascinated, indeed in awe, that Robin raised $500 million. Hear that again. It is billion with a B. Now, if you're in sales or pursuing an entrepreneurial track, you may find it challenging to get someone to buy whatever it is that you're selling or you're offering. So how does somebody like Robin generate $500 million in philanthropy? I asked her.
No one's ever asked me that question, and I'm glad that you did. First of all, no one person is ever responsible for raising that kind of money. I mean, it really is a group effort with CEOs, board members, institutions, vision, and again, the persuasion to have someone do that. So it's systematic, identifying philanthropists who might be interested in your mission, figuring out who can open the door to that philanthropist. And this is a very quick, high-level summary of how it works. Getting a meeting. The most important thing is to get the meeting, and then asking for the money and closing the money.
When I asked Robin how she was so successful, she gave me a clear and concise answer. This is a great lesson for all of us. Whenever we're going for that ask, get to the point, drive the point home.
I'm very proud to be a great closer. I love asking for money. And one of the things that is necessary when you do that is to really pump yourself up and understand that you're allowing people that have the wherewithal to do something they really want to do. I always said to them, unless you're happy making this gift, do not make this gift. And to make sure that when we do get in front of people that have billion-dollar means, bring the right people with you that they trust. Trust is really important. I said to somebody the other day that wealthy people can be very lonely in that they don't have a lot of people they can trust. Build the relationship and the money will flow to good causes.
Think about what you want to ask for and be very clear in your mind about why asking for that thing, whether it be a promotion, raise, etc., why that's important to you. The clearer you are in what you're asking for, the better you'll be at delivering it. You aren't immediately great at this. None of us are. And like any skill, you develop that skill over time with a lot of practice.
That's exactly what I'm actually offering some people through my program. Is how to persuade and how to ask for what they want. The number one thing, and it's also that I suggest, is you have to understand the other person's framework. It's not about you when you're going to ask. It's about the other person. So what is it that they want? How do they see you? What pressures are they under? What's going on in their life at this moment? Okay. So if you go in, let's say very basically to ask for a raise and your boss has been under a lot of pressure and they're dealing with either an acquisition or they're getting pressure from their boss, you don't go in to ask for a raise at that point. You just don't. You have to hold yourself back. If you feel like it, you need to approach them in such a way that recognizes their pressures. I know this isn't a good time, but let's say another place has approached me and I really want to be honest with you and tell you I would love to stay here. I know you have a lot on your plate. Let me know when we can discuss this. So you never want to you always want to give people the space and time to think about what you're asking them. And you really want to take into consideration where they are at that moment when you're making your request.
We have talked about fear before and how it holds us back. But when fear holds us back from going for the ask, our minds want us to believe we are less than or not good enough, or even that we're not worthy or deserving of what we're asking. But there's another side to this I want you to consider. If you're going to ask for something, you must be prepared to hear the word no. It can be scary or unnerving, but you may be in a role where hearing no is just part of the job. And for Robin in her career path, this was certainly the case.
Oh, it's huge. It is the big block in front of our face that we're afraid of what somebody might say. We're afraid we're going to embarrass ourselves. We're afraid we're going to be rejected. And, one way to shake up that fear is to do more of what you're afraid of. If you are afraid of moving forward, or you don't know how your boss feels about you, or you want another job, go out and interview. Do a low stakes exercise where it's not really going to matter what they say. And you I say, build up your immunity to emotional allergens. You get to control the way you feel as you practice. And you notice if somebody says, no, or rejects you, it's not the end of the world. And for me, I got to the point where I was asking for money so often. And I was in a situation, it was a husband and a wife, and the wife had said, oh, well, he's going to give $1 million, and it was all set up. And I was with a very high level person. And I asked the husband, and he said, are you out of your mind? And the wife looked horrified. I just started to laugh. I said, okay, I guess so. And then went right back at him and said, well, what do you think I should ask for? What are you willing to do? Let's talk about it. So the more you practice, the more you're able to pivot, and the more you realize a no is not a no. It's not now. It's not the way you asked me. It's not what you asked for. If you're still in conversation with that person, it's a win.
Whether you're a career professional, entrepreneur, or business owner, there is going to be a very strong chance that you're going to hear no a lot. What I want you to think about here is that whenever you hear no, that means there is some kind of objection. What you need to do here is get very clear on what the objection is so you know where they're coming from.
All the time. I would hear no all the time. And the other thing is that sometimes the person on the other end that you're asking doesn't hear clearly. I had one situation where the person thought somebody else had asked him for, I'll just throw out a number, $10 million, and they had actually only been asked for maybe half of that, but they didn't understand it. So clarification is really important too. When you when you can't understand why somebody said no, clarify. See what they actually heard from what you had said to them. That's important.
What happens when your organization says no to you? By this, I mean, they don't want you to work there anymore. You've done great work for them, but someone has decided your time there is done. This is what Robin calls an involuntary exit.
I had been with an organization for a very long time, had been successful at raising funds, and without any indication at all, I walked in one morning and was asked to step down, just like that. And I was totally stunned. As I called it, was a stun gun moment I will never forget. And it took less than 30 seconds, but right there, everything that mandated where I would live, when I would wake up, what I would be thinking about when I went to sleep, and who I would talk to in every scheduled hour of my day, it was gone. So I didn't even know how to talk about this. I didn't know how to tell people about this. And I set out to research what other people did. How did they deal with this? And I found out there was no manual for how to deal with this. There were articles about, oh, this is how you fix your resume. But the whole emotional, mental, internal narrative that goes on after this happens to you, there was nothing really addressing that, because you really have to address that before you can go public and figure out how you want to talk about it and what you want to do next.
There are a lot of terms for being told your services are no longer needed. Fired, canned, terminated, not renewing your contract. Once you hear those words, your mind will start to race. If you've ever been terminated from a position, and I have, your emotions, just like mine, will go all over the place. I asked Robin to share what was that one emotion she felt the greatest during her involuntary exit.
Shame. And you feel like you've done something wrong, even though intellectually you know you haven't, but you feel like something is wrong with you. And that was true for all the women that I interviewed. And Brene Brown, who is a very popular author in business circles, she acknowledged that depending on how you're let go, that's how deep the shame will be.
You may have heard that there's no easy way to fire someone. I want to challenge that. Firing someone isn't easy, but it is the right move based on a decision the organization has made. And hopefully, when that message is delivered, it is done professionally and gracefully. And that's what makes it a little easier. Robin calls this compassionate firing.
Compassionate firing is very difficult. We're not taught to do that. I'm not, saying it's hard for anybody. It really is. And I have spoken since to a few people who have had to let people go. I've had to let people go. It's difficult. Our natural tendency is to go away from pain toward pleasure. And the painful conversation when someone's across the table from you, it's hard for anyone.
I have had to fire people in my career. I've never enjoyed it. But my mindset was that if the roles were reversed, I hope I would have been treated in the same way. While all of that is nice, we must acknowledge that processes need to be followed.
But I would say a couple things. One, HR is there to protect the company, not the employee. So many times people have to go through the process that HR dictates in order to protect the company and avoid liability. And that process, the way people interpret it, they may say, well, this is a sort of a paint by numbers way. And if I do it this way, there won't be any problems. And I think that's the majority of the way that people operate. Others who are maybe more experienced and have a little bit more control in their companies, they take the HR guidance, but they do what you do. They put their own humanistic point of view on it. One man said to me that when he has to let people go, he always calls them up after they've been let go. And he knows they're furious and he knows they're hurt, but he wants to help them and he wants to check in and see how they're doing. And he said to me, the minute that you feel comfortable letting people go is the minute you should step down from a leadership role.
Wow. Thank you for that, Robin. That point references how much leadership is all about service to the organization and the people who work there. Never take that for granted. I asked Robin to share more about her exit and was curious to know if she saw it coming.
Everyone asks that question. And I say in my book that you never know the exact moment when your fate was decided. And so spending your time looking back and digging for clues is not the direction you need to be facing. You need to be facing forward and moving forward. But of course, we all do that. I did it as well. And had I connected a few dots that had to do with changes in leadership, maybe, but I had been there through many other changes in leadership. So there's nothing, there's nothing definitive. We can always make our assumptions. We can always make our guesses. I think the important point is that it's now all about you moving forward. And that's really what you should be focusing on and not saying I should have seen it. Why did I say this? I remember when I said this in a meeting, I was shut down. There are so many of those moments for me. And for the women I spoke with, it's like, I just don't know. And is it relevant to how I move on?
As someone runs the gamut of emotions when they've been let go, Robin shares the steps people take when dealing with their termination and how they can navigate through those feelings.
I actually looked at, it's called Parker and Bowles is a British psychologist who did a lot of study on the trauma of separation and attachment. So this has to do with children losing someone or a divorce or something of that matter. And the 4 stages that he described seem to relate more to this experience of being let go. And the first stage is shock and numbness, which is what I said when I said it was a stun gun moment. The second one is yearning and searching. And we kind of yearn to be back where we were, right? And we yearn for news of our ex company, and we search for stories. The third is disorientation and disorganization. And I had one woman say to me, they spend 2 days on orientation at my company when they hire you, why don't they spend 2 days on disorientation when they let you go? Because it is totally disorienting. Just all of your patterns, your maps are all thrown to the wind. And the last is reorganization and resolution, when you know you've finally come to a point where you're no longer just talking about where you were, or as I say, you're talking about present tense topics. And when you tell somebody that you're with your company, you're no longer with your company, you say it in such a powerful way, positive way, that people say, congratulations, I'm glad that, you're moving on, and you know that you've really hit that point. I think for those that are vulnerable, immediately vulnerable, one of the great exercises that Megan Marzo and I spoke about, and she's a clinical psychologist that I interviewed for the book, she said, is to sit down and write down what happened. I said, really? Just write down what happened? She said, yes. It's your first step in controlling the narrative, as opposed to being buffeted by your fears, what you think other people think, your insecurities, but actually write down exactly what happened. And then you can continue to evolve that over time. And it helps you, again, develop that immunity to these emotional allergens that we might be feeling.
We process things differently. It's how we deal with the circumstances given to us. In our conversation, Robin wanted to reiterate a point she made earlier about writing and how it can help someone process the pain they are going through as they learn to control their narrative.
For me, writing has always been a way of figuring out what I really think. And I think for your clients, it could be as well.
As we wrap up, I asked Robin to share what advice she would give someone to help them build their mid-career GPS.
Well, I think it's very important for them to think about, with honesty and authenticity, what they want to do next and how they describe that to themselves. Okay. I think that as they are building and recreating their inner narrative, the story they're telling themselves about what they want to do next, they can also start taking steps toward building their outer story. And in order to do that, I think it's very important to network outside of your current job, of the world that dominates you now. Join professional organizations if you're not already a member of them. Speak to people like John Neerall. Speak to other people. This is a very generous world in terms of, if you want to be connected to somebody, just to have an exploratory conversation, it's easy, and most people do it. So you have to start broadening your influence, your world. And the other thing that I do think is important is to build your financial portfolio so that you are not afraid that financially you're going to be really, living from paycheck to paycheck. This is a big concern, as is insurance. And I know that for me, I am the sole support for my family. And so when things happen, I really had to put together a plan and think about financial sustainability. It's not something I take for granted ever. And as somebody who asks for money, and where money I know plays such an emotional role in so many things, we really have to come to grips with that and again, be very practical about what we want to do in order to move on.
Robin Merle has written an excellent book that details her emotions, thoughts, and actions as she navigated her involuntary exit to help women learn from her experiences and those of the people she interviewed for her book. If you're dealing with a separation or termination from your previous organization, I invite you to get Robin's book and check out her website. Here's how you can connect with Robin and learn more about her work.
They can connect to me by emailing me. I'm open to emails, robin@theprofessionalguide.com. Say that again, robin@theprofessionalguide.com. I also have my website, which is www.theprofessionalguide.com. They can find me on LinkedIn. Just Google my name, Robin Merle. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. So if you Google my name, you will find me. And you will also find my book, which is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Bookshop. Just go on Amazon and Google Involuntary Exit, and I will come up.
And I will make sure all of that is in the show notes for the listeners to go back and reference. Robin Merle, thank you so very much for spending some time with us today, sharing your story and really putting a wonderful context to your career and what obviously was, as you referred to, as a stun gun moment about your involuntary exit and your wonderful book. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, John. This has been a real pleasure.
Robin Merle, thank you so much for being an absolutely wonderful guest and for writing a book that I know is going to continue to help so many people. One of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the podcast is so you could share your story. And I know for those of you who are listening, there is something Robin has said today that has touched you, inspired you, or motivated you to take whatever action is next. And that is about how we show up. So remember, we build our mid-career GPSs 1 mile or 1 step at a time, and how we show up matters. Make it a great rest of your day. If you enjoyed today's episode and don't want to miss another one, follow on Apple Podcasts or wherever you usually listen, and kindly remember to rate and review. Visit johnnarroll.com to download your free job search tracker and other free mid-career GPS resources right there on my homepage so you can start building your mid-career GPS. Come join my private Facebook group at Your Mid-Career GPS and join an amazing community of people like you who are all working to figure out whatever is next for themselves and their careers. And don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn and follow me on social at John Narroll Coaching. I'll see you next time.